How does a player win Player of the Game while sitting on the bench when it matters most? That's the question WNBA fans couldn't stop asking after Aliyah Boston's latest unrivaled appearance. The award flashed on screen. The praise rolled in. But in the final stretch of the game, Boston wasn't out there. And that contradiction instantly lit up timelines. Some fans called it disrespect. Others called it strategy. A few wondered if this was a quiet message being sent. Because when a former Rookie of the Year, a franchise cornerstone, and one of the league's most reliable bigs is watching from the sideline in crunch time, people notice. This wasn't just about missed shots or rotations. It was about optics, expectations, and how quickly narratives form around star players. And once that narrative took hold, it sparked a much bigger debate that went far beyond one box score. It started as a stat graphic, then it turned into a debate, and within minutes, it became a full-blown conversation across women's basketball circles. Aliyah Boston was announced as Player of the Game. On paper, it sounded normal. She's a former Rookie of the Year, a franchise pillar, someone coaches trust. But fans who actually watched the game noticed something that didn't sit right. When the fourth quarter tightened, when possessions mattered, when the game needed a closer, Boston wasn't on the floor. Instead, she was watching from the bench as Kiki Iriafen took over, and not quietly either. Kiki flipped the game on its head, scoring relentlessly and carrying the offense when it mattered most. That contrast is what raised eyebrows. One player dominated crunch time, another received the award. Immediately, timelines split. Some fans called it confusing, others called it unfair. A few went further, questioning whether the decision had already been made before the game was even finished. Boston's stat line didn't scream disaster, but it didn't scream dominance either. 4 of 11 from the field. No three-point attempts. Several missed shots in one sequence that quickly turned into memes. Yet she also did what elite bigs do, kept fighting, kept rebounding, kept creating extra chances. To some, that effort mattered more than efficiency. But optics matter in basketball, and so does timing. When a star player sits during the most intense moments, people don't assume coincidence. They assume meaning. Was it a matchup issue, a lineup decision, or simply Unrivaled's unique structure rewarding overall impact instead of late-game heroics? That's where the debate really took off. Some fans argued the benching wasn't a demotion at all. In Unrivaled, rotations are experimental. Wins and losses don't carry the same weight. Coaches test combinations. Development matters more than standings. From that angle, Boston sitting wasn't a statement, it was strategy. But others weren't buying that explanation. Because stars are judged differently, especially ones expected to anchor a franchise long-term, especially ones linked to future MVP conversations. When expectations are that high, every decision gets magnified. And just like that, one quiet rotation choice turned into a loud discussion about respect, perception, and how narratives around elite players are shaped, sometimes without their input. But that moment on the bench, that wasn't the full story. What made this moment linger wasn't just that Aliyah Boston sat, it was who didn't. While Boston stayed on the bench, the offense flowed through Kiki Iriafen, and it worked. The pace picked up, the spacing looked cleaner, the shots started falling, and suddenly the question shifted from why Boston sat to something far more uncomfortable. What if this lineup was simply better in that moment? That idea alone made some fans uneasy, because Boston isn't just another big, she's a foundational player. The kind teams build around, not rotate around. Seeing her sideline while another forward closed the game felt like a crack in a carefully built narrative. And narratives matter in women's basketball. For years, Boston has been framed as the reliable constant, efficient, physical, coachable, someone who raises a team's floor even when the offense stalls. But Unrivaled isn't built like the WNBA. The court is smaller, the pace is faster, the margin for non-spacing bigs is thinner. That context matters, but not everyone wanted to hear it. Some fans argued the benching exposed a stylistic mismatch. Others pushed back, saying it was unfair to judge a franchise centerpiece based on a league that openly prioritizes experimentation. And then there were those who believed the explanation was even simpler. The decision didn't mean anything at all. Still, the optics were unavoidable. When crunch time arrives, coaches send signals whether they mean to or not. And in this case, the signal looked like trust shifting elsewhere, even temporarily. That's when comparisons started popping up. People brought up how often elite stars sit in unrivaled, how rotations change nightly, how player of the game awards don't always align with fourth quarter usage. But comparisons only go so far, because Boston isn't just competing with the moment, she's competing with expectations. And those expectations are massive. Every time she steps on the floor, she's evaluated as a future MVP candidate, a top-tier big, someone who should dominate any format. So when she doesn't close, fans don't ask why this game, they ask what does this say long-term. That's the trap of stardom. Even reasonable decisions get turned into speculation. And before anyone could fully digest the benching, a new debate took over timelines entirely. Because this wasn't just about minutes anymore. It was about perception, about roles, about whether development leagues quietly reshape hierarchies, even when no one admits it. And what happened next only made those questions louder. The reaction online didn't move in one direction, it fractured. On one side were fans insisting the conversation had gone too far. They argued this was exactly what Unrivaled was designed for: flexibility, experimentation, and freedom from rigid star hierarchies. To them, overanalyzing one late-game rotation missed the entire point of the league. But the other side wasn't buying that explanation. They saw something else, a pattern, a moment that felt uncomfortably familiar in women's basketball, where respected players suddenly find themselves questioned the second the spotlight shifts. For these fans, the benching wasn't neutral. It felt symbolic. And that's where emotion entered the debate. Supporters of Boston pointed to her resume: Rookie of the Year, defensive anchor, a player who rarely demands touches yet still impacts winning. They argued that sitting her during a crucial stretch sent the wrong message, not just to her, but to how foundational players are valued when flashier options emerge. Meanwhile, others leaned into a harsher truth. They claimed this was exactly how competitive environments work. If another lineup performs better in real time, reputations shouldn't override results. In their eyes, protecting stars from tough decisions only slows progress. Neither side was entirely wrong. The divide exposed a deeper tension that's been building for years between loyalty and evolution, between honoring proven stars and embracing players who better fit modern spacing and pace. Unrivaled, intentionally or not, placed that conflict under a microscope. And social media amplified everything. Clips were reposted without context. Screenshots of box scores replaced game flow. Short quotes became evidence. Before long, the discussion wasn't even about basketball decisions anymore. It was about respect, status, and who gets grace when things don't go perfectly. That's when comparisons started flying. Fans dragged in other stars who have faced similar moments. Players who were once untouchable until suddenly they were. The implication was subtle but heavy. No one's role is guaranteed forever. But that idea didn't sit well with everyone. Because Boston isn't just any player. She represents stability in a sport that often struggles to protect its pillars while chasing growth. So when her role appeared even slightly uncertain, it triggered a reaction far bigger than the moment itself. And just as that argument hit its peak, the conversation took an unexpected turn. because the benching wasn't the only thing raising questions that week. Behind the scenes, something else was brewing, and it had nothing to do with rotations or box scores. While fans were still arguing about rotations, another moment quietly changed the tone of the conversation. It wasn't a play, it wasn't a stat line, it was a comment. During a post-game exchange that initially felt harmless, a brief remark was picked up, clipped, and shared across social media within hours. On its own, it sounded neutral, almost routine, but in the context of everything already brewing, it landed differently. Some fans interpreted it as a subtle dismissal. Others believed it was taken completely out of proportion. The comment didn't mention Boston by name. It didn't criticize anyone directly, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Coming right after the benching controversy, many viewers felt it reinforced the idea that certain players were being quietly repositioned, not through bold statements, but through tone and implication. That's when speculation exploded. Rumors suggested the remark reflected a broader shift in leadership priorities within the league. Some fans believed it hinted at which styles of play were being elevated and which were slowly being pushed to the margins. Others pushed back hard, arguing the internet was reading far too much into a throwaway line. Still, the damage was already done. Clips spread faster than full interviews ever could. Captions framed the moment as intentional. Comment sections filled with debates over respect and accountability, words that mean very different things depending on who you ask. And suddenly, the original basketball discussion was gone. What replaced it was something deeper, a conversation about power, about who gets protected by context and who gets judged by sound bites, about how quickly narratives form in women's basketball and how hard they are to stop once they take hold. Players, current and former, began weighing in. Some called for calm. Others hinted that these moments aren't as accidental as fans like to believe. No one outright accused anyone of wrongdoing, but the undertone was unmistakable. This wasn't just about one comment. It was about how influence works when leagues grow, attention multiplies, and every word carries extra weight. And Unrivaled, still defining its identity, was suddenly being tested in a way no one had planned for. Because once perception shifts, control slips away. And as this narrative spiraled, another uncomfortable question emerged. Was this conflict truly about basketball? Or was it exposing something much bigger that the league hadn't fully reckoned with yet? What happened next didn't come from the court at all. It came from the response. As the clip continued to circulate, fans expected the usual cycle, a few hot takes, a few defenses, and then silence. That's not what happened. Instead, the reaction kept growing, and it came from places no one anticipated. Former players began posting vague but pointed messages. Nothing explicit, no names, just enough to suggest they recognized the pattern. Words like familiar, predictable, and we've seen this before started appearing again and again. To longtime followers of the league, that language carried weight. Then media coverage shifted. What started as a discussion about performance quietly turned into something else. Articles and segments stopped focusing on stats and started focusing on tone, on body language, on who gets the benefit of explanation and who gets reduced to a headline. The conversation wasn't loud, but it was persistent. Some fans pushed back hard. They argued the league was being unfairly scrutinized, that every comment was being dissected beyond reason. That growth comes with noise, and not every moment needs a deeper meaning attached to it. To them, this was just another example of social media overreaching. But others weren't convinced. They pointed out how quickly narratives solidify around certain players, while others are shielded by context, how mistakes aren't weighed equally, how silence can sometimes speak louder than clarification. And once that comparison took hold, it was impossible to ignore. Sponsors and partners stayed quiet, Official accounts avoided the topic altogether. No statements, no clarifications. That absence only fueled more speculation. Some fans believed it was strategic. Others felt it confirmed discomfort behind the scenes. Rumors began to swirl, carefully framed, but impossible to miss. Some fans believed internal conversations were happening that the public wasn't meant to see. Others suggested the league was still figuring out how to manage visibility at this scale. None of it was confirmed, but the uncertainty alone kept the story alive. What made this moment different wasn't outrage. It was hesitation. People weren't yelling past each other. They were pausing, questioning, rewatching clips, rethinking assumptions. And that kind of reaction is far more dangerous to a growing league than a loud argument. Because once fans stop reacting emotionally and start analyzing patterns, the conversation changes. This wasn't about one player anymore, or one comment, or even one game. It was about whether women's basketball, entering a new era of attention and money, was prepared for the level of scrutiny that comes with it. And as the league tried to move forward, another development quietly raised eyebrows, a decision that seemed unrelated at first, but suddenly felt impossible to separate from everything that came before. Next, the league didn't announce anything. There was no press release, no explanation, no acknowledgement that anything had even changed, and yet everyone noticed. In the very next stretch of games, rotations shifted. Matchups looked different. Players who had been central to recent conversations suddenly felt less visible, while others were placed front and center. On paper, it could all be explained away as strategy, coaches experimenting, teams adjusting, developmental decisions. But timing matters. Fans immediately connected the dots. Comment sections filled with side-by-side screenshots, minute comparisons, and lineup breakdowns. It wasn't aggressive at first. It was analytical, curious. People weren't accusing, they were observing. And that made it harder to dismiss. Some argued it was coincidence, that narratives had already poisoned perception, and now every normal decision was being filtered through suspicion. They weren't wrong. Once attention reaches a certain level, nothing feels neutral anymore. But others pointed out a familiar pattern. When controversy appears, the league doesn't confront it. It absorbs it. It spreads responsibility so thin that no single moment can be blamed. No headline can land cleanly. Everything becomes justifiable in isolation and questionable when viewed together. Players were asked about it post-game. Their answers were careful, polite, almost rehearsed. Words like trust, process, and long season kept repeating. No one sounded angry, but no one sounded fully comfortable either. The most telling part wasn't what was said. It was what wasn't. No one denied the shift. No one addressed why certain moments were suddenly framed differently, and no one stepped forward to reset the narrative. Instead, the league let the schedule do the talking. Games kept coming, highlights kept rolling, new storylines were pushed. The hope was simple: replace the conversation before it hardens. For casual viewers, it worked. But for the fans who had been watching closely, the silence felt louder than any statement ever could. Because once you notice how quickly the spotlight moves, and who it moves away from, you start asking why. And when the answers never come, speculation fills the space. The league may have believed this decision would cool things down. Instead, it raised a new question entirely. If nothing was wrong, why did everything suddenly feel different? And as the season pushed forward, another moment loomed, one that would force a comparison the league could no longer control. It didn't start as a debate. At first, it was just a stat graphic, then a clip, then a late-game possession that looked a little too familiar. Fans weren't searching for controversy, they stumbled into it. Two players, similar moments, very different reactions. One was praised for patience, growth, and doing the little things. The other was questioned, picked apart, reduced to what they didn't do instead of what they did. The contrast wasn't dramatic on its own, but stacked together, it became impossible to ignore. Social media did what it always does. Side-by-side videos circulated. Screenshots of post-game quotes followed. Even broadcast language was analyzed. The tone, the pauses, what was emphasized and what quietly disappeared. Some fans believe this is where frustration really took hold. Not because one player was treated well, but because the standards seemed to shift depending on who was being discussed. Effort was praised in one case and reframed as limitation in another. Development was framed as progress or as an excuse. To be clear, no one involved publicly called it unfair. But fans did. And once they did, the league found itself in a tricky position. Acknowledging the comparison would validate the tension. Ignoring it risked letting the narrative spiral on its own. So the broadcast stayed clean, the interviews stayed safe, the language stayed vague. Yet the comparison lingered. Because basketball fans don't need to be told what they're seeing. They can recognize patterns without commentary guiding them. And when those patterns repeat, they stop feeling accidental. Some argue this is just the cost of attention, that bigger moments invite harsher scrutiny, that rising expectations come with discomfort, and that may be true. But others point out something harder to dismiss. When similar performances lead to different conversations, the difference isn't always about basketball. And once that idea takes root, it doesn't go away easily. The league hoped the debate would fade as the schedule rolled on. Instead, it followed every big moment that came next, quietly shaping how fans interpreted what they were watching. And the next flashpoint didn't come from a loss. It came from a win that raised even more questions. The final score said everything was fine. The team won. The box score looked respectable. Headlines moved on quickly. But for a lot of fans watching closely, the win didn't feel clean, it felt complicated. Because buried inside that victory was a decision that raised eyebrows. Key minutes shifted late, rotations tightened, and one player who many expected to close the game spent a noticeable stretch watching from the sideline. No injury report, no public explanation, just a quiet change that spoke louder than any post-game quote. Some fans brushed it off as strategy. Others weren't so sure. Clips from the final minutes started circulating almost immediately. Not of mistakes, but of absence. People rewound possessions, checking who was on the floor and who wasn't. Comment sections filled with the same question, phrased a dozen different ways. Why now? This wasn't a blowout. It wasn't a throwaway game. And it wasn't a matchup that demanded an obvious adjustment, which made the choice feel less tactical and more intentional. To be fair, coaches make tough calls all the time. Matchups matter, momentum matters, and sometimes the right move isn't the popular one. But fans didn't see a breakdown. They saw inconsistency. Earlier in the season, similar situations had produced different decisions. Other players were allowed to play through rough stretches, trusted to figure it out in real time. This time, the leash felt shorter. That's where the tension crept back in. Not because of the benching itself, but because of what it symbolized. To some, it looked like progress was being quietly overshadowed by caution. To others, it felt like confidence wasn't being returned at the same rate it was earned. Post-game interviews didn't clear things up. The answers were polite, vague, focused on team basketball and long-term goals. Nothing incorrect, nothing revealing, and nothing that addressed what fans were actually asking. So the speculation filled the silence. Some believe it's about fit, others think it's about experimentation. A few argue it's simply part of a bigger developmental plan that won't make sense until later. Maybe they're right. But when a win creates more debate than relief, it usually means something underneath hasn't been resolved. And as the spotlight on women's basketball continues to grow, those unresolved moments don't fade, they stack. Because fans aren't just watching games anymore. They're watching patterns. And the next game promised another moment that would test whether this was just noise or the start of something bigger.